Welcome viewers and dear learners. In this video about the short story The Cop and the Anthem. In last two videos we discussed about the central figure Soapy, who was a vagabond and a criminal by background. It was a winter season that was approaching fast, and in America, in Madison Square, where he had been living, there under the open sky, he anticipated the worst and chilly winter, which probably could not be so easy to survive in the open situations. So he wanted to get inside the prison whereby he could get survived. So Soapy made almost a couple of futile attempts of getting inside by doing something nonsense. Initially, he tried to enter one of the luxurious cafes where he was caught hold by the head waiter and was stopped or restricted to get inside. Afterwards, on his way, he saw one of the very transparent, attractive, dazzling, lit up shop which was made up of glass, and he threw a stone upon that window. It cracked, and people and even the cop rushed to the spot, and Soapy, who was the real culprit behind, stood over there, and at the inquiry of the cop, he said, "Why don't you consider me as a person who might have thrown a stone upon that glass?" Since the character Soapy was looking very normal, relaxed, and his voice was also very confident, the cop was not ready to accept him even as a clue. At last, he entered one of the ordinary restaurants, that too without any challenge, where he actually had all the things which he wanted to consume: beefsteak, flapjack, donuts, and pie. And at last, he declared that he was a penniless fellow. He said that money and himself, they were absolutely strangers to each other. It was a very deliberate attempt to declare it without any hesitation, so that the waiter and the manager would caught hold of him and would hand him over to the cop. And he suggested the waiter not to lose even a single minute, and better call the cop and get me or hand me over to the cop. So to this, the waiter was surprised, and instead of handing him over, he said, "Now I am reading the next part." "No cop for you," said the waiter, with a voice like butter cakes and an eye like the cherry in the Manhattan cocktail. "Hey, con!" He, instead of calling the policeman, he asked one of his colleagues, and neatly upon his left ear on the callous pavement, two waiters pitched Soapy. Callous means very hard, and pitched means threw. So those two waiters caught hold of him and threw him outside the restaurant, where he got a very huge setback, because he never expected such a result of his being to that restaurant. Afterwards, he arose, joint by joint, as a carpenter's rule opens, and dusted his clothes. Since he was thrown on the very hard surface, he got hurt severely, so he could not get up from there instantly. He had to get up in a installment plan, like the scale or the rule which normally a carpenter used, which is a long one but which is three folded one. So it is always open in three folds, exactly like Soapy also got up from his place in three installments, and later on he dusted his clothes. Arrest him now an elusive dream. The word elusive means very difficult, or which was a very which was very next to impossible. The island seemed very far away. A policeman who stood before a drugstore 2 doors away laughed and walked down the streets. Normally, in case any such incident happens, the cop or the police approaches immediately to the situation to at least inquire about, but instead of inquiring or instead of even paying special attention to, the policeman laughed at the situation and walked down the street. So everything was going very against the character Soapy's expectations. Soapy was seized with a sudden fear, and some dreadful enchantment had rendered him immune to arrest. The word enchantment means to be under the spell. He thought something magical has happened with me. That's why, despite making so many attempts to get himself arrested, he was getting failed. Normally, people make their attempts to survive or to escape from the cop, but here the situation is absolutely opposite. Soapy was making desperate attempt to get arrested, but he was getting utter failure at every single attempt. He was in a state of panic, and when he came upon another policeman longing grandly in front of the glittering theatre, he caught at the immediate straw of disorderly conduct. Dear students, here he caught at the immediate straw of disorderly conduct. This is a very beautiful idiom used by the writer. To catch at the immediate straw means to make a desperate attempt to salvage a bad situation. Here, this character Soapy, who had been making every possible attempt to do something whereby he could get arrested, he found himself in front of the glittering theatre. He thought it was a right place again to make one more attempt, that is of disorderly conduct, means behaving not in a gentle way, doing something odd or doing something very serious and silly, so that the cop would take his every action seriously, and its ultimate result might be his prison, his imprisonment. On the sidewalk, Soapy began to yell. To yell means to shout, drunken, gibberish, at the top of his harsh voice. He kept on making noise. He kept on shouting and doing some unintelligible speech. That had nothing to do with what he wanted to say and what he actually spoke. So absolutely misbehavior he created over there. He danced, he howled, he raved, and otherwise disturbed the skies. To disturb the skies means to disturb the entire scenario where everybody was expecting to enter the theatre and watch the movie, and people were just standing outside waiting for their chance to get entered, and here they saw such a mad fellow. Of course Soapy was not a mad one, but he deliberately made an attempt to behave so that the cop would get attracted by his activities and would at least inquire about why he was doing so. The policeman merely twirled his club, turned his back to Soapy and remarked to a citizen. Instead of going close to Soapy, the policeman just spun his ruler or club and turned his back to Soapy and remarked to a citizen. Means he, instead of inquiring about the silly behavior of Soapy, rather he remarked to one of the citizens standing by, and what he said, this it is one of them ale lads celebrating the goose egg that gave to the Hartford College. Noisy, but no harm. We have instructions to let them be. Instead of getting catching hold of this fellow, he said, we have the instructions to let them because they are not actually too harmful to the people and scene or situation around. So we are letting them instead of catching them there. Even after making the pretension as if he was a mad fellow, he was utterly failed again. Disconsolate, Soapy stopped his unavailing racket. Would never a policeman lay hands on him? In his fancy, the island seemed an unattainable Arcadia. He buttoned his thin coat against the chilling wind. It is a question by the writer whether policemen would never lay hands on him. Normally, in case we do something wrong, immediately we are inquired by the police if he or she is around us. Here, for 3 to 4 times, he did so many things, and that too deliberately, well before the cop. But instead of going and instead of getting even a single clue about him as a culprit or a person behind any misdeed, he was always rescued, and every time the situation was favoring or rather disfavoring in this regard. So the writer had a question in his mind, would never a policeman lay hand on him? In his fancy, the island seemed an unattainable Arcadia. Arcadia means here it is given a mountainous district in the Peloponnese of southern Greece. In poetic fantasy, it represents a pastoral paradise. In short, it is a place where one could aspire to be there. So he wanted to be there in the prison. So Arcadia is nothing but the prison he wanted to get inside. In a cigar store, he saw a well-dressed man lighting a cigar at the swinging light. He had set his silk umbrella by the door on entering. Soapy stepped inside, grabbed the umbrella, and sauntered off with it slowly. The man at the cigar light followed hastily. One more chance he got, so he wanted to make use of it. In a cigar store, he saw a person who was well dressed, and he was lighting a cigar at the swinging light. He had, that fellow who was, lighting a cigar had a silk umbrella which he kept by the door on entering. Soapy stepped inside. He had nothing to do with smoking a cigar or other job, but he just entered, or he stepped inside to pick up that umbrella. He grabbed the umbrella and sauntered off it slowly. It means sauntered means walked in a relaxed manner. Normally, if you pick up the thing which is not yours, you try to run away from there, but he deliberately walked very slowly, and that too in a relaxed manner, so that the fellow whose umbrella it was would get attracted or get attention by his act and would run after him and complain about him that he had done a theft, and that was the very motive behind doing so. The man at the cigar light followed hastily. Of course, the person who was lighting up the cigar, he saw his silk umbrella was taken away by a fellow. So he also started walking hastily. Soapy was walking slowly and this fellow was following him hastily, means in a hurried manner. My umbrella, he said sternly. The fellow said, this is my umbrella. Oh, is it? Sneered Soapy. Instead of saying, oh sorry, excuse me, I took it unknowingly, he said, is it? It is yours? And that too in a mocking or making a contemptuous remark or tone. He tried to get that fellow angry, adding insult to petty larceny. Well, why don't you call a policeman? I mean, he did it so deliberately. He wanted to get charged with the theft and he would complain to the policeman about the theft, and ultimately Soapy would get arrested, and that was the very motive behind that nonsense again. So larceny means theft of personal property. Well, why don't you call a policeman? It was a very free suggestion one more time he had given there to this fellow. I took it. I mean, he confessed. He accepted that yes, he took it away, and that too with a very conscious mind. Your umbrella, why don't you call a cop? Instead of just quarreling with me or inquiring about, you better go and call a cop. There stands one on the corner. Again he gave a very clear hint that the cop was very standing close to them. The umbrella owner slowed his steps. Instead of running towards the police or the cop, he slowed his steps. Soapy did likewise. So also he was also walking slowly with a premonition that luck would again run against him. He also started thinking that this time again the fellow may not probably help me out. The policeman eyed at the two curiously. When these two people were doing this activity of inquiring to each other about the umbrella, the policeman was actually observing both, and that too curiously. Of course, said the umbrella man. Well, you know how these mistakes occur if it is your umbrella. I mean, now the situation is again turned about. Instead of going and putting a complaint before the policeman, this fellow said, maybe probably it is your umbrella. I would have mistaken of picking up from there. I hope you will excuse me. Instead of calling the policeman, this fellow started saying sorry to Soapy. I picked it up in this morning in a restaurant. If you recognize it as yours, why I hope you will. I mean, again the situation turned. Again the situation took such a turn which he did not expect to happen. But this fellow saw the very confidence of Soapy and he thought probably the umbrella would be of Soapy. So instead of making any complaint against Soapy, he accepted maybe probably, because to the same day he had picked up that umbrella from one of the restaurants and probably it would be him or it would be Soapy's. So he said, you better take it away, I don't mind. So this way a very funny situations were happening with this fellow Soapy. Now I hope you have understood this part very well. So the last part we will see in our next video. Till then, I hope you like this video. Please mark it liked, and if you like it, please share it with your friends and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thank you.